Okay, hi there again. In our previous tutorial, I took you through the theory of the end of month summary process. So that process that I take all of my coaching clients through to help them identify how much do I need to have in my central working account to cover all my future expenses as and when they turn up. This is a really powerful process because it means that we can measure how we are going. We can measure exactly how much do we need to have in our central account so that by putting aside 1/12 of our future expenses, we have enough money sitting there to pay our expenses as and when they turn up. So again, no more juggling required, no more credit card required. We've got the cash sitting there accumulating, ready to pay those bills when they come our way. So very exciting. So last tutorial, I talked to you about the theory behind that. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to actually put that into action using the Grandma's Jars application, because the Grandma's Jars application automates this process for you. So that's what I'm going to show you now. Okay, let's now have a look at what this end of month summary process looks like in the Grandma's Jars budget application. This is our end of month summary page, which can be found under budget tools in the main menu bar. This first table on this end of month summary page is where you manually update the budget with your actual bank account balances. So here we can see a list of Dean and Emma's bank accounts. We can then see the current balance in the budget. The current balance is what the budget believes you should have in your bank accounts based on the starting balance at the beginning of the month and all the transactions you have entered into the budget throughout the course of the month. Now the actual balance columns is where you update the budget with the actual balances of each of your bank accounts on the last day of the month. Once you have submitted your balances, the system will then adjust the account balances in the budget. In this middle column, you can see how much of an adjustment was required for each bank account. You can also see here that Dean and Emma have an unusually large adjustment figure. This is because they have taken surplus funds from their accounts last month to pay down debt and had forgotten to enter the transfers as a transaction. If you are diligent with entering your transactions each month, these adjustment figures should be relatively small because your budget should closely reflect what's going on for your bank accounts. So every month, we enter the actual balances of our bank accounts here to update the budget, which ensures that our budget never strays too far from the reality of our bank accounts. This last column, the amount to use for summary column, is used to tell the budget which of these bank accounts holds the money that is sitting in our jars. So that money you have accumulated for all your future expenses, what we're identifying here is which bank account is all that money sitting in. Dean and Emma are following my recommended bank account structure, so all the money to cover their jars, or cover the funds remaining in their jars, is sitting in their central account. So I have entered the balance of their central account in this column as well. If there was any money left in their everyday account, I would have included this figure in the amount to use for summary as well. But Dean and Emma have 0 in this account, which is perfectly normal for the everyday account on the last day of the month, so I have entered 0 into this column. And even though Dean and Emma have $22,000 sitting in their savings account, none of this money is allocated to their jars, so I have put a 0 in the amount to use for summary column. Remember, what we are trying to do is make a comparison between what our budget says we've accumulated in our jars and what our bank accounts actually have. We can then also update our credit card balances and the balances owing on our debts. But the most important feature of this process is the surplus deficit formula down the bottom here. This is a formula that tells us whether or not our bank account matches what our budget says we need. So on the left-hand side here, you can see the bank account balance of $6,704.78. This is the total of all the bank account balances we listed in the amount to use for summary column in this top right table. The next figure is this month's credit card spending. This is simply the balance that has been added to the credit cards over this month. If you pay your credit card off each month, or if you've paid your credit card down this month, then this figure should be 0. However, if there have been any net increases on your credit card this month, then that is a figure that should be showing here. The next figure is your everyday allowance. This is the amount that you allocate to your everyday jar each month. For Dean and Emma, this is $1,306.92. If you are following our recommended bank account structure, this money should be available in your central account on the last day of the month, ready to be transferred to your everyday account on the first day of the month. And then we have the total of our jar funds remaining. For Dean and Emma, this was $4,811.11. If I flick back to Dean and Emma's jar summary page for last month, you can see this figure here. So this is what was left in their jars at the end of last month. If we now head back to the end of month summary page, we can see that these three things added together total $6,118.03. This is the amount that Dean and Emma need to have in their bank accounts on the last day of the month. We can see here that the $6,704 that Dean and Emma have in their bank account easily covers their next month's everyday allowance and the funds remaining in their jars, which means they have a surplus of $586.75. This means that they have enough money in their bank accounts to cover their jars, which means that when they look at their web or mobile app and they look at the funds remaining, they can be absolutely certain that the figure showing there is backed up by real money in the bank. So any money that we have over and above this figure is surplus and can be used to start filling your rainy day fund, which is the second pool in our cascade. So that is step 1 in our cascade ticked off. Bank account equals budget. So let's have a look at what it would look like if Dean and Emma actually had a deficit. So what I have done is I've gone and reduced the balance in Dean and Emma's central account from $6,704.78 to $5,704.98. What this now means for the end of month summary formula is that instead of having a surplus of $586.75, they now have a deficit of $413.25. So while the credit card spending remains the same, the everyday allowance remains the same, and the funds remaining in the jars remains the same, you can see that we now have a deficit because the amount in the bank account has changed. And what this means is that our first pool, that pool that requires bank account to equal budget, isn't yet full. So next month's surplus will go towards topping up the central bank so that the bank account does cover what the budget says we need. Until this first pool is full and we have a green surplus figure here, Dean and Emma cannot get on with building a rainy day fund, eliminating debt, or saving towards their lifestyle goals. Now in this case, Dean and Emma do have $22,000 in savings, so we would be pulling $413 out of their savings to top up their central account, because the number one priority, and that's why it's the first pool, is that our first pool always needs to be full before we do anything else. Because like in a cascade, unless the top pool is full, water can't overflow into the lower pools. In this instance, we would take money out of the savings to top up the central account. However, if you do not have savings, we would then be waiting on next month's surplus, assuming of course that we have one, to top up that first pool. Now I'm hoping that this makes sense. The reality is most of my coaching clients do have a deficit to start with, but with a couple of months worth of surplus, this pool can typically be filled very quickly. Getting this first pool filled means you will have enough money to cover your expenses as and when they turn up, and it lays the platform to sustainably build savings and pay off debt. So there you go, the end of month summary process. I love taking clients through this process because it removes all the uncertainty and the subjectivity from a client's finances and gives them an objective measure that tells them, how am I going? How am I going with my finances? If you have a surplus at the end of this end of month summary process, then you know that you have all of your future expenses covered, and that by putting aside 1/12 of your expenses, you will have enough money to meet your expenses as and when they turn up. So in essence, you filled this first pool, and what's going to happen now that that first pool is filled, water is going to overflow from that into your next pool. So our next pool being our rainy day fund, and once we've got our rainy day fund filled, then we can move on to debt elimination. However, if you've got a deficit, that's okay. Most people start with a deficit the first time they go through this end of month summary process. Now, you've got a deficit. The good thing is you know you've got a deficit, you know how much it is, and you now have a plan in place to actually top up that deficit, to eliminate that deficit over time. So as that surplus funds keeps flowing into that central account, you will eventually get to the point where you have this first pool filled and your deficit is gone. So you have a plan to make that happen. And as I said, I love sitting with clients when they have a surplus, because we can then say, right, how are we going to use the surplus? Have we got the rainy day fund in place? Have we got debt that we need to pay off? Have we got lifestyle goals that we're working towards? It is so much fun to be able to quantify that surplus every single month. And if you follow this process, you will get to that point where you do have a surplus. It is really exciting. I promise you, you will get there. Okay, your homework now, your homework, keep recording all your expenses in your budget. This is really important. Just stick to it. Just keep using your budget, and that surplus will become reality. The second thing that you need to do is at the end of the month, on the last day of the month, you need to record the balances of your bank accounts and your credit cards so that we can complete your end of month summary process. The third thing is keep your eye out for an email. This end of month summary process is such an important part of what we do, such an important part of staying on top of your finances, that every month on the first Thursday, well it is at the moment, on the first Thursday of every month, we run an end of month summary webinar. That webinar is to walk you through the end of month summary process, because I know it's a little bit convoluted, but once you get your head around it, once you've been through it 2 or 3 times, you'll go, yeah, this is easy, I've got it. But for those first couple of times, get in, register for the webinar, ask your questions, get your head around it so that you have that as a tool going forward to guide your spending, guide your progress, and really help you take control of your finances.